It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Puan Anita Ahmad, the CEO of MySDG Foundation, our strategic partner for today, to deliver the keynote address. Puan Anita has been instrumental in catalyzing multi-sectoral collaboration and innovation in the SDG space. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage.
Datuk Sri Mustafa Muhammad, Advisor to ABPGM. Rahmah Othman, Executive Director to APPGM. Professor Dr. Danisan Jayasuriya, Head of Secretariat APPGM SDG, who has reminded me to speak slowly. So I'll try my best, Datuk, without making people fall asleep this morning. Dr. Richard Marshall, representing the Acting UN Resident Coordinator, and who's also with the UN RC office, and Zuel Ng of MySDG Academy. Esteemed guests, fellow advocates, and champions of sustainable development, as all of you are. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. It is truly an honor to be with you this morning to share some thoughts on a topic that lies at the very heart of our collective future, impact on grassroots, localizing the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm very pleased to speak about this because I've been in the sector for about almost 25 years, and I've seen the greatest impact on communities at the grassroots. While I've done policy work, and policy work is important, there's nothing like working with communities to see changes, especially over time. And it's a lot more heartening and gratifying to work with communities at the grassroots. As we all know, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, with its 17 ambitious sustainable goals, represents humanity's most comprehensive blueprint for peace and prosperity. From the urgent call to eradicate poverty to the critical need to combat climate change, these goals are universal in their scope, deeply interconnected in their nature, and truly transformative in their ambition. Yet for these grand aspirations to take root and flourish, they must be translated from global pronouncements into tangible local realities. This precisely is where the profound power of localization comes into play. Internationally, we have witnessed remarkable efforts to adapt the SDGs to incredible diverse contexts, despite some mixed results on the SDG goals, as Dr. Richard shared. We see cities proactively developing their own voluntary local reviews, as we have seen in Malaysia as well, meticulously tracking their progress and identifying areas for improvement. We have also seen indigenous communities with their profound connection to the land integrating traditional knowledge into sustainable practices that have been honed over generations, albeit more can be done. The message from this global movement is unequivocally clear. There goes my pronunciation, sorry about that. The SDGs are not merely for nations or international bodies, they are for every neighborhood, every village, every individual, which I think is what we need to really explain to everybody, that it's not something that's carried by a country, but every individual as well. And quite a lot of times, a lot of people can't see that connection. And I've had to really explain this to a lot of individuals, even to the people that I work with and stakeholders. They think that it's a big concept, but actually, if you really truly understand it, then it relates to every one of us. Now, this global embrace underscores a fundamental and undeniable truth. We can only genuinely achieve the promise of leaving no one behind if we begin our journey at the very foundation, at the grassroots. And I was thinking about the word grassroots. I really like the Malay version, which is Akar Umbi. When you talk about Akar, it's the roots, right? And Umbi being, very important to the heart of what we do. However, I believe that translating these global ambitions into grassroots impact is not without its significant challenges. The very complexity of the SDG framework with its numerous goals, targets, and indicators, which I still have memorized to this day, can be daunting at the local level. Communities often face a severe lack of resources, be it financial, human, or technical, to effectively implement and monitor SDG initiatives. There's also the persistent challenge of data gaps at the local level, making it difficult to accurately assess needs and measure progress. Furthermore, I quite find that there's often a disconnect that sometimes exists between national policies, which are often broad, and the specific nuanced realities faced by communities on the ground. Ensuring genuine inclusivity, reaching the most vulnerable, and fostering true ownership and participation rather than top top-down directives are continuous hurdles we must collectively overcome. Nevertheless, here in Malaysia, our commitment to the SDGs is unwavering, reflected in our national policies and the tireless efforts of countless individuals and organizations. We have seen incredible dedication from various stakeholders in driving the localization agenda. Key Malaysian organizations like Pusat SDG Negara, APPGM, CSO SDG Alliance, Urbanist, and if I can say so as well, Yayasan MySDG, universities, and the myriad of stakeholders and organizations whose capacity we build have been very instrumental. All of you have been, and that's why you're here in this room today. We champion, advocate, coordinate, mobilize resources, and reimagine sustainable development goals that suit our needs and our local context, from shaping legislative frameworks to driving community-led initiatives and innovative urban solutions. These are just a few examples among many, illustrating the rich tapestry of commitment across our nation. The collective efforts of these diverse organizations, alongside countless other NGOs, dedicated community leaders, insightful academics, and forward-thinking private sector entities, and yes, the private sector are also very much involved in Malaysia, powerfully showcases the immense potential of collaboration. And as we have seen through the Partners of SDGs partnership as well. It is through these diverse partnerships, bridging government, civil society, academia, and business, that we can truly unlock the transformative change required to achieve the SDGs. Ultimately, leaving no one behind should not be a slogan. It is a profound commitment that can only be fulfilled by empowering communities to be at the heart of developments and the SDGs. For change to be truly sustainable, I believe it must originate from and within communities. Our role as policymakers, practitioners, and advocates is not to dictate, but to enable. We must continue to provide the tools, the knowledge, and the platforms for communities to identify their own needs, because we cannot imagine their own needs, only they know their own needs. Design their own solutions because they have their own knowledge, and lead their own development journeys because ultimately we must remove ourselves from that journey for them to take that journey themselves. True empowerment, after all, comes from within. Only then can our collective efforts be truly sustainable and resilient. So with all these efforts that we have done, obviously we still need to do more, and as we know, even the government has said that we will likely only meet 43% of our SDGs by 2030. What more do we need to do in Malaysia with sincerity? And I say this with Anna as well, with trust and responsibility. First, I think we still have a long way in translating the SDGs into relatable language and action. To this day, when I speak to somebody and say, I'm from Yayasan MySDG, they'll say, my what? SDG tu apa, right? Still, to this day, despite all our collective efforts for many years. So we need to move beyond technical jargon and translate the SDGs from a framework to a language every individual finds relatable. Easier said than done, but I think that's something that we need to work harder on. This means simplifying complex concepts into easily understandable terms. Crucially, this also means actively listening to grassroots voices, understanding their unique challenges and aspirations, and translating those insights into tangible SDG solutions that resonate directly with their lived experiences. And I must congratulate APPGM. I think you've done a wonderful job of doing that so far. Second, we need to continue equipping local civil society organizations and communities with the skills, knowledge, and resources to understand the SDGs, collect data, and manage projects effectively. For example, at Yayasan MySDG, yes, we provide grants for SDG projects, but we commit for each of our grantees to also have 3 rounds of training for different capacities. Because despite the fact that they're very good at what they're doing, there's still room for them to learn, especially on the SDGs. So we have to train them quite a bit in terms of collecting data on SDGs and how to report against the SDGs. And we really must leverage technology more. So for example, yesterday I was a judge for nominating Malaysian local digital solutions for an international competition. And interestingly, I learned that in Malaysia, we have agricultural, fishery, nutrition, and even autism therapy technology solutions designed to address various community needs. It was quite impressive actually what I saw yesterday, but a lot more support needs and funding for these kind of companies to be able to extend their services across Malaysia. So quite a few of them I found disappointingly were concentrating in the Klang Valley, and I kept asking them, why are you not extending this kind of technological services to other parts of Malaysia? But they have their own set of challenges. But it's certainly a platform that we need to leverage more so that we can move faster. Third, we need to enhance data disaggregation. Of course, we all talk about this over and over again. To truly ensure that no one is left behind, we require granular data at the subnational and even community levels. This detailed data will enable us to design and implement highly targeted interventions, ensuring that the most vulnerable and hard-to-reach populations are indeed reached and supported. I always say this in many platforms that quite often we have a lot of money in the country, but we are not using data to really allocate our resources properly, and there's a lot of overlapping in between our work, which is why this kind of partnership is quite important, and why when I first joined Yayasan MySDG, so the first people I met were all people who were working in the SDGs to make sure and try to reduce overlapping. But we don't have this available in data. So another thing that we are doing at MySDG as well is to talk to other philanthropic organizations to try to coordinate our work, because collectively we have a lot of funds, but we find that we are overlapping quite a bit. So a lot more needs to be done in terms of not only getting that data, but also sharing that data together with each other. Fourth, we need to foster innovative local financing mechanisms. This is something that Yayasan MySDG is trying to advocate for. We need to explore and implement approaches like community funds. I've seen in my previous work how community funds really helps. So quite often we think communities may not be able to fund themselves, but actually they are able to if we think of different ways of doing that and replicating that. Of course, there are also bigger financing mechanisms like social impact bonds, which is complicated but can do a lot. And we need to see how that can be implemented further in Malaysia. And of course, accessible microfinancing solutions. I believe we do have microfinancing solutions, but some of it are not within reach for communities. So we need to think of different ways that can really reach the communities that we try to serve. These mechanisms are vital to empower grassroots initiatives and ensure their long-term financial sustainability. More importantly, reducing reliance on external aid, as I think a previous speech also alluded to. Lastly, we need to foster understanding of the SDGs with children. Quite a lot of what we do, while great, we try to do among adults, which is a little bit too late, I feel. Yes, we can influence and try as much as possible, but really we need to instill this in children. I ask, so quite often when I go for these engagements, I don't see the education, apart from the academic institutions being much involved, but what about schools? And even starting at kindergarten, because then I don't have to go and say, when I say I'm from Yayasan MySDG, then people automatically understand that. At the moment, we're not educating our children young enough on the SDGs. And not necessarily, of course, towards SDGs, but the values behind the SDGs, which is even more important. Because by educating our younger generation about these global goals from an early age, it will cultivate future leaders who are inherently aware of and committed to sustainable development. If I may say so, quite a lot of times, while our policymakers or our politicians, they do want to do this kind of work once they get into position, it really needs to start as an everyday kind of habit first, before you try to do even bigger things. Most of all, you must approach this task with keikhlasan. So I always say that when you work with communities, you must work with your heart, as well as with technology, and as well as with financial and the correct capabilities, but you must start with the heart. With sincerity in our hearts, truly believing with optimism that the immense potential of every individual, regardless of their background, and every community, no matter their location. Let us embrace our collective amanah, our sacred trust, to build a Malaysia where prosperity is shared, where the environment is protected, and where every voice matters. The journey ahead requires courage. It requires a lot of courage for the work that we do, more empathy, and unwavering commitment from each and every one of us. But by steadfastly localizing the SDGs, by genuinely empowering our grassroots communities for their real betterment, we are making an invaluable contribution to a more just, equitable, and sustained world, not only for Malaysia, but for everybody. Thank you.